I know it's on everyone's mind, and I expect questions on that. I just want to talk about our opposition day motion today. A lot of people are starting to become more and more worried about the cost of the pandemic and the debt and deficit. The reason people are worried is because they don't want to feel the burden of that. They don't want to have to pay even more. People have already sacrificed a lot. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their businesses. Some are worried about if they're going to shut down forever. And so those folks who are worried, they're saying, we can't afford to make any more sacrifices if we've already sacrificed so much. So to those people, they're worried because liberal governments and conservative governments have done exactly this. In the past, when times are tough, liberal governments, like Prime Minister Trudeau's in the past, and conservative governments have cut help to people. And a part of the reason why we were so unprepared is because of decisions made by conservative and liberal governments who cut help to healthcare. And by cutting that help, put us in a worse position. So that's why our Opposition Day motion makes it very clear that to pay for the programs, the help that people need, it should not be you that has to pay for it. It should not be families and people and workers and small businesses who have struggled. It should be those who have profited off the pandemic. It should be the ultra wealthy that contribute their fair share. So we're proposing a tax on the wealthy of those who have fortunes of over 20 million and a tax on excess profits, those who have made massive profits. Those large corporations who have made massive profits during this pandemic need to pay their fair share. To fund the healthcare that we need, to fund the housing that is so important as a form of recovery and to help people get a place to live, and to make sure that we are investing in a guaranteed livable income, some way to get money directly to people who can't work to give them that support and that dignity. These are the things that we're calling for today. Donc, je sais qu'il y a beaucoup de monde à ce moment, un grand nombre de gens commencent à être un peu inquiets à cause du coût de la COVID-19. Et ils ont peur pour les factures ou le prix de la relance. Et ils ont peur parce que dans le passé, ce qu'ils ont vu, c'est le fait que les gouvernements libéraux, comme celui du Premier ministre ou les gouvernements conservateurs, ils ont coupé l'aide aux gens pour des raisons budgétaires. Et les gens ont déjà fait des grands sacrifices. Ils ont peur pour ce que le gouvernement va faire. Donc, ce qu'on demande aujourd'hui, c'est une motion, une proposition claire, que ce ne doit pas être monsieur, madame, tout le monde qui doit payer le prix pour la relance. Ça doit être les grandes entreprises qui ont fait des profits records, les gens qui ont des fortunes de plus de 20 millions de dollars. C'est eux, les ultra riches, qui doivent payer leur juste part pour le prix de la pandémie, pour le prix de la relance. Et c'est ça pour payer les services dont on a besoin. Parce que dans le passé, les coupures ont créé la situation, ont aidé à créer la situation qu'on a à ce moment. Donc, pour mieux financer les soins de santé, pour mieux financer les logements abordables, le logement social, et pour mettre en place un revenu garantie de subsistance. Ce sont les choses importantes pour les gens, les appuis, les programmes sociaux, et on demande que les plus riches payent le juste part et que le gouvernement libéral ne met pas la pression sur les épaules de monsieur, madame, tout le monde. Et avec ça, je suis prêt pour vos questions. With that, I'm ready for your questions.
Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. We'll now start the question period. As usual, one question and one follow-up. We'll start with 3 questions on the phone and then we'll turn to the room. Opératrice, est-ce que nous avons une première question au téléphone?
Oui, nous avons une première question de Catherine Lévesque de la Presse canadienne. À vous la parole, please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh. Sur votre motion d'aujourd'hui, j'aimerais juste savoir combien estimez-vous pouvoir amasser d'argent avec cette taxe sur les super riches par année?
Donc, le bureau parlementaire des budgets a nous donné un chiffre pour la taxe sur les ultra riches. Ça peut être plus de 70 milliards de dollars en 10 ans. Donc, ça, c'est un chiffre qu'ils ont montré, ils ont présenté. Avec la taxe qu'on propose sur les profits excessifs des grandes entreprises, c'est quelque chose on sait qu'on peut réaliser beaucoup de revenus avec ça, mais c'est quelque chose qu'on est en train de modifier pour créer la bonne exact chiffre. Donc, à ce moment, on sait que ça peut réaliser beaucoup, comme on a fait dans le passé. Dans les guerres mondiales, on a proposé quelque chose de similaire et il était tellement on a vu un grand succès avec la capacité de réaliser un revenu avec ça.
Donc, est-ce que vous êtes confiant que ça va payer pour le déficit en ce moment? Et mon autre question, c'est j'aimerais vous entendre sur l'élection américaine. Qu'est-ce que ça vous fait de voir que les États-Unis sont encore aussi divisés? Puis, est-ce que vous pensez que les démocrates ont peut-être raté une occasion de choisir un candidat plus à gauche comme Bernie Sanders ou Elizabeth Warren?
OK, commençons avec la première question. Donc, on propose une alternative de ce que les gouvernements libéraux et conservateurs ont fait dans le passé. Ils ont mis toute la pression sur les épaules de monsieur, madame, tout le monde. Ils ont coupé les services dont on a besoin. Ils ont coupé le financement pour les soins de santé et ça a aidé à créer la situation maintenant où on n'était pas prêt pour la pandémie. Donc, on veut éviter tout ça en proposant une alternative, qu'on peut mettre la pression sur ceux qui ont gagné un grand profit dans cette pandémie, ceux qui ont les richesses. Donc, notre proposition, c'est une alternative de mettre les pressions sur les gens, et au lieu de ça, de faire payer leur juste part des gens qui sont les plus riches, les ultra riches. Donc, ça, c'est le contraste qu'on propose. Et avec votre deuxième question, deuxième partie de deuxième question, c'est vrai que les États-Unis est divisé. Et moi, je garde l'espoir pour les résultats, pour faire sortir M. Trump, comme j'ai dit hier. Mais avec la division, ce que je veux dire, c'est le fait que le pays est divisé, c'est à cause du fait que le gouvernement aux États-Unis, dans le passé, n'a pas réagi à un problème. Les gens ont peur pour leur avenir. Ils ont peur parce qu'ils n'ont pas des emplois. Dans l'avenir, pour eux, ils ne vont pas un avenir où ils ont d'espoir. Donc, il faut renforcer notre position d'aider les gens, d'avoir un système de santé qui travaille pour tout le monde, une économie qui travaille pour tout le monde, de créer des bons emplois, parce que c'est vraiment cette inégalité qui a créé les conditions pour cette division. Donc, mon avis, c'est vraiment les inégalités qui créent les divisions et c'est le travail d'un gouvernement d'effacer ces divisions, d'effacer ces inégalités en mettant en place des programmes sociaux.
Opératrice, prochaine question au téléphone.
Merci. Our next question. Notre prochaine question est de Hélène Buzetti du Devoir. À vous la parole, please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour Monsieur Singh. Je vais faire avec vous ce qu'on a fait avec Monsieur Trudeau. On lui a demandé s'il était possible de caricaturer le fait religieux, incluant le prophète Mahomet. Monsieur Trudeau hier s'est ravisé en disant que oui, les caricaturistes devaient être libres. Alors j'aimerais savoir de votre côté, puisque vous aviez vous aussi indiqué que il doit y avoir des limites à la liberté d'expression. Est-ce que vous revoyez un peu votre position?
Donc ma position c'est il faut condamner complètement, absolument, toutes sortes de violences et terrorisme. Il n'y a aucune justification pour le terrorisme. Et si on dit quelque chose, si on écrit quelque chose, ça ne justifie pas la violence ou le terrorisme. Et je suis quelqu'un qui toujours appuie l'importance d'avoir des débats difficiles.
Ouais, c'était pas ça ma question. Je veux savoir, est-ce qu'on peut caricaturer le prophète Mahomet?
J'ai donné ma réponse.
Pas vraiment, non.
Opératrice, prochaine question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Notre prochaine question est de Hélène Buzetti du Devoir. À vous la parole.
Je viens d'avoir une question.
Pardon, je m'excuse. Alors, la prochaine question est de Alex Ballingal from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi, how's it going? Sorry, I just got a baby walking in the house here.
All good, man. How's it going?
Good. Just going back to the U.S. election.
Yep.
So I guess you obviously often talk about people feel left behind, people are worried about their future. Last week we heard Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative leader, talking about the decline of union membership, seemingly making a similar pitch to people who feel left behind. Does the result in the U.S., where Trump seems to have done well with similar constituencies, non-urban, blue-collar workers, according to the sort of most recent analysis, does that worry you that the right is winning this argument, its efforts to appeal to these constituencies? And if so, where does that leave the NDP in your view?
I think, just to double down, I think there is absolutely a problem that people that are struggling, people that are working class, people that are struggling to find jobs and to pay their bills have been let down. And it is because of a system that has been built very clearly in Canada by Liberals and Conservatives, but a system that has been designed and built to exclude them. Because there are people that are winning. The ultra-rich continue to make massive profits. They profited off this pandemic. The richest Canadians made record profits. And the thing that I put to the Conservatives and the Liberals is that to do something about that, we have to tax the wealthiest. That the ultra-wealthy, those who have made massive profits during this pandemic, have to pay their fair share. We don't hear that from the Liberals or the Conservatives. The Liberals will talk about a small change they made 6 years ago, 5 years ago. That is not good enough. We're talking about those who have massive profits, those who have fortunes of over $20 million, those who have made record profits, the Jeff Bezos, the Amazon, the Walmarts, the Netflix, the Facebooks, they make massive profits. We're saying the only way to actually help out working class people is if the ultra wealthy pay their fair share finally, and we invest in helping people out. The Conservatives and Liberals aren't prepared to do that. And that's what our motion is about today, is to say, the way forward is not to cut the help that people need, not to put the burden on working class families, on everyday families that are struggling, small businesses that are shutting down. It should not be on their shoulders. It should be on the massive wealthy corporations and Canadians that are the ultra rich. They should be paying their fair share, and no other party is willing to say that and come out and clearly and as concretely say that.
Just as a follow-up, Yves-François Blanchet was saying this morning that, if he was a Democrat, he'd be asking himself, looking at the strength of Trump's vote, what went wrong. You obviously have also said you hope Trump loses. What do you think it says about American society, if you can weigh in on that after all the problems that you highlighted, kids in cages, routine dishonesty, the list might go on. But what do you think that the strength of Trump's vote says about American society? Does it give you pause that so many people, despite everything we've seen over the past 4 years, voted Trump?
It just makes me want to work harder. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are deeply worried and don't know how they're going to make their bills, how they're going to build a future for their kids, for their families. They are worried, and they have been let down. They've been let down, and they're frustrated and they're angry. And I want them to know that they matter and that I care about them and that I see them and I hear them. I know that there is massive unfairness, but what's happened is when that unfairness happens, the right use it to divide people. Use it to pit people who are actually in the similar circumstances against each other. They start pointing the finger at new Canadians or immigrants. They start pointing the finger at people who look different. And it's easy to do that if you are vulnerable, if you're afraid, if you're worried. And really, I want that same anger and frustration to be channeled at the fact that there's a system designed that allows billionaires to make profits off the pandemic while small businesses shut down. A system is designed to allow the wealthiest to get richer while everyone else has had to buckle down and are deeply worried about their future. That is not a mistake. That is a decision that was made. And I believe we can make better decisions. And I want to tell those people, we are going to make better decisions. I'm going to make better decisions to make sure you have a better life, that you have a good chance in life, that you can actually build a good life for yourself and your family. And there is a way to do that. It is making sure that the ultra wealthy stop exploiting people and that everyday people get a hand up and get a support so they can live their best lives. That's what I wanted to tell those folks.
We'll now take question in the room. CTV.
Hi, it's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. Hello.
Hi.
The U.S. election results show a deeply divided America, and recounts and tensions are likely to grow, with the potential that we won't have a clear result on who the U.S. president is going to be for weeks. Given that our economies and our businesses and our societies are so deeply intertwined, I'm wondering what you want to see from the federal government to try to ease some of the fears domestically.
Well, I think first we got to acknowledge that a lot of Canadians woke up today pretty worried and pretty afraid. And there's a lot of people that see the massive mishandling of COVID-19 and the threat of that global pandemic being exacerbated by the presidency of Mr. Trump. And for a lot of reasons, people wanted to see him lose. I've made that really clear. What we need to do now is to continue to lay out a course of action in Canada, how we're going to make sure we make the right decisions when it comes to our healthcare, that we make the right decisions about making the wealthy pay their fair share, and we don't put any more burden on small businesses, on families, on people. We don't put the burden on them. We make sure that those who have the ability to pay their fair share do so. I think we can lay out a clear path that lets Canadians know that we are going to make good decisions here. We're going to maintain our clear COVID-19 protocols based on science and based on the evidence, and we're going to hope for the best in the States.
And as a follow-up, this really wasn't the clear repudiation of Donald Trump that a lot of progressives and analysts thought that it would be. In fact, some have said the results actually show that the political landscape has changed and that many aspects of Trumpism are here to stay permanently. I'm wondering what you think the impact of this will be on the United States, and how does Canada navigate this sort of new political landscape?
I think more than ever, we have to get really serious about why this has happened. Why, despite all the obvious, glaring problems, massive problems, and abject failure of leadership of President Trump, that people still voted for him. I think it speaks to that desperation that people feel, the frustration and anger that people feel, that they haven't gotten fairness in their life, that they are not able to get ahead. And I think that's been misdirected purposely. It's been used to divide people by people like President Trump, by Mr. Trump. And I think we have an opportunity now to say there is legitimate frustrations. People are angry and upset for good reason. But the reason is because the system is designed this way. It's designed to allow the wealthiest to have tax loopholes to get away with not paying their fair share, and everyday people have to pay their fair share. And that has been designed by liberals and conservatives. So I think we've got to be really honest about the fact that frustration is real, and let's solve that by saying, hey, you deserve better. People deserve better, and we can do that. There's a clear path to doing that. And I think that's what the States has to do as well. They have to be honest about the fact there's massive inequality and unfairness, and be serious about the solutions. The solutions are making the wealthiest pay their fair share and investing in people, education, healthcare, supports for people.
Prochaine question, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. Est-ce que vous avez des conseils peut-être pour Monsieur Trudeau pour les années à venir, pour entretenir des bonnes relations avec le président, peu importe quels seront les résultats officiels?
J'ai parlé de ça avec mes amis, avec mes collègues. Et si vous êtes un bon ami, on peut dire un meilleur ami peut dire que vous avez un petit ami qui n'est pas bon pour vous. Vous pouvez faire ça. Vous pouvez dire à votre meilleur ami que votre relation, c'est une relation d'abus. Vous pouvez dire ça. Et comme un bon ami des États-Unis, je pense qu'il faut critiquer où il doit critiquer. il doit soulever les problèmes où ils sont des problèmes. Et c'est ce que je pense. Quand il y a un intermédiaire qui est dans la maison de votre ami, vous dites, hey, vous êtes un intimidateur et c'est pas bon ça. Et je pense que ça, c'est important de faire.
Pensez-vous que M. Trudeau l'a fait suffisamment et qu'il pourrait être prêt à le faire à l'avenir?
Non, mais je pense qu'il n'a pas le fait suffisamment et il faut le faire. Il y a des propos clairement, complètement inacceptables que M. Trump a dit qu'il doit dénoncer. Il doit dénoncer comme un bon ami. Et j'exige le Premier ministre de faire ça. Moi, je vais continuer de faire ça. C'est important.
Next question, Canadian Press.
Good afternoon, Mr. Singh. I wanted to just ask you about the Opposition Day motion, because you talk about the wealth tax. You mentioned the PBO. The PBO only estimated it was going to be about $5.6 billion that you'd raise. There's also a number of social programs that I'm sure you'd like to see happen in this country. $5.6 billion on a deficit that could be approaching $400 billion doesn't sound like we're really paying for all those things. So I'm wondering how far you think this is actually going to go to address some of these concerns that you say everyday people are feeling, and as we're seeing in the U.S., obviously has reflected in their electorate.
Well, this is the contrast. Like what we're not hearing from the Liberals or the Conservatives is anything other than the traditional approach that Conservatives and Liberals have taken, which is when times are tough, you cut programs, you cut help to people. That's been their go-to. I'm saying that's wrong. That there is significant revenue that we can gain from not just the two measures that we talked about. And the PBO has said it's pretty significant when we look at the wealth tax, that it was costed out. That's a massive new revenue that we could get from people that could afford to do so. And that's important to point out. The excess profit has a potential to have massive revenue implications, which is also not something to ignore. On top of that, we've heard from the PBO that the offshore tax havens and loopholes that allow companies to make profit in our country, but then take the profit they make in Canada off Canadians, hide it in a bank outside of our country, and not pay any taxes here. That's completely permissible right now. That needs to end. There's so much we can do to make sure that those who have the means and the resources pay their fair share, and we don't put the burden on people. But the knee-jerk reaction of the Liberals and Conservatives, times are tough, let's tighten the belt, and they do it to people. They don't do it to the wealthiest. They don't do it to the richest. They don't do it to the ultra-wealthy corporations that have made massive profits. And that, to me, is a problem, that their quickest reaction is, times are tough, okay, you know what? Families that are struggling, you've got to pay. That's wrong. And that's what I'm talking about today, that it does not have to be that way.
And speaking of divides, I want to ask you about this, which is there seems to be a growing divide within the labor movement in Canada about the backing that the Canadian Labour Congress has just given to Bill Morneau in his bid for the OECD. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Because you now, as representative of a lot of workers, what do you say to them as they're trying to figure out whether they should be following the CLC, whether they should be following someone else? What do you say to them?
That decision did not speak to the voice of the workers of Canada, and many of the major unions have come out saying that is not at all our opinion. If we can be really straight up about the previous finance minister, Mr. Morneau, he proposed privatizing pensions, which is a direct attack on working people, which is directly contrary to what the unions are based on, helping working people, making sure working people get a good shot at life. And what Mr. Morneau suggested and what he put forward, which was found to be a conflict of interest, was a bill that was effectively going to privatize more pensions, make it harder for people to retire, make it harder for working people to have a future. So he is not at all representing the interests of working people, and many of the major unions have said that.
We'll have time for one last question on the phone. Opératrice, dernière question au téléphone.
Alors, je n'ai plus de questions pour le moment. I don't have any questions.
This concludes the press conference then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.